I'm revisiting a pattern that imitates a mantis shrimp. Um, we've done one at a previous time, but this is an important bait for striped bass and other anglers in the Northeast. Pretty much everything eats them that can find them. Any predator, whether it's a striped bass or black sea bass or a weak fish, which we call squetig up here, in deference to the Indians that named them. Um, Anything virtually that would eat a crustacean are going to eat mantis shrimp. They probably would taste very nice prepared with cocktail sauce for us. And there can be a fairly sizable creature. Um, I tend to use a number one hook for most of the imitations up here, but a 1/0 would be certainly, as we've mentioned at other times, suitable. In this particular case, we're tying something called a Kwan, and we could call it a Kwan Variant quite nicely, but there are so many variations of this Kwan pattern that almost everything that you see called a Kwan is a variant of some sort, and the materials vary about as much as anything else. So you can use anything that you want, really, in a nice tan color to create a tail. In this case, I've got a nice soft material that swims nicely, and this happens to be one of Enrico Puglisi's hairs, and you'll notice that it tapers off to really thin, and because it's synthetic, you can adjust the hair quite nicely to any length you want just by cutting off the end. And we're going to make this fairly long. It's going to be 3 times as long as the hook itself. 1, 2, 3. And we're going to tie that in right here at a point where our thread is above the point which bisects the point of the hook and the back edge of the barb, and trim this off, leaving some along the hook shank because tying this down makes it very secure. Synthetic hair of any kind tends to be a little slippery. These creatures have a segmented body. We've mentioned that before. In this particular imitation, unlike the black that's used often for segmenting other things, we're using a brown. And we're going all the way along and just doing the top and the bottom, and you can sort of see where you've been as you pull it up like this, and just make a few markings, and you have a nice, neat, long, movable tail. And if you put something in place here at the base of the tail to keep it from wrapping down, it generally will stay put. We're going to accomplish that in this particular case by imitating the egg cases that mature mantis shrimp have, more in the tropics where you find them more often, inshore, because they've come in to spawn. This is called egg yarn, and it's the same stuff that's used to make egg flies for trout and salmon in Alaska, and it's thick and made up of many fine fibers, and doesn't really have much use other than to create egg shapes, or in this case, egg cases on a shrimp. And we're just going to figure eight this stuff in place. I'm using a monofilament thread. If you hadn't noticed, you can't see it. And I'm tying that down nice and snugly right at the base of the tail. In fact, I'm pulling it back there to make sure it doesn't go anywhere, and wrapping right in front of it. And then by lifting this stuff up together, once it's figure-eighted in place, I can take a pair of scissors and twisting them in an arc as I make a cut, I get a little bit of fluff left. And you can just kind of spread that down, and by golly, there is your egg sac on the back edge of this creature. And you can see that on the bottom side it's kind of bare, and I just pinch that together a little and take a turn of this invisible mono and sort of pull it down there so that it surrounds the hook shank a little bit. If there's a bare spot, it really doesn't matter. But I'm going to take the monofilament thread now, and I'm going to wrap it forward right to the eye of the hook. Normally, when you're tying in weighted eyes like this, you might want to leave a little space for a head. In this case, we want this eye right up tight against the front of the shank, right up against the eye. And you will see shortly why that's important. But we're going to put that in place right in front of the body material I tied down and figure-eight it in place using the method I like, which is going underneath the eyes after you've gotten a basic figure-eight there, and then pulling that thread in by figure-eighting again, holding the eyes in place. And then we're going to go right back here with our tying thread right back onto the base of the egg sac. Now I've taken some thread. In this case I like to use a multicolored variegated wool, and wool that absorbs water also helps the fly sink a little more slowly. You can use thick stuff, you can use thin stuff, but you cut it up into little pieces like this. And you take a piece and figure-eight it in place on the hook shank. You don't have to really worry about getting it even as you can most simply manage, so that it's in place, and then I pull it back tightly, take a turn of thread in front of it, and then repeat. One right in front of the other. And then the next one, pull back. So you want these tightly together with a wrap in front each time. You can blend colors or make them all the same. You can really kind of do anything you want. I like to use earthy tones, and whether they're tan or cranberry or anything else really is unimportant. You probably don't want them to be fluorescent chartreuse, although that probably would work. I've never tried it, but I wouldn't be surprised if fish would eat that too. Sometimes they're not all that picky. And on a number 1 hook with this size yarn, you can just about squeeze 4 pieces in there, and you sort of have to push the last one underneath the eye as you tie it in, just to get it in there. And that's all the space there really is. And then a few securing wraps, bring your thread up in front of the eye, and tie it off. We're not done yet. I'm going to put a little head cement on the forward wraps, right down the center of the places where I put the yarn, and then we're going to flip this over and run a bead of head cement right down the center on the bottom. And you want to give this a little time to set up. There are a lot of ways to spread the fibers from the yarn apart. One is a grooming brush that you would use for a dog and a cat, and you can catch the yarn with that and slowly brush it and watch it just sort of pull the fibers apart. You can combine that with a dubbing needle and get in there and pull the yarn apart, starting out at the tip. Certainly the quickest way to do it is to use a little brush. And you want to put your fingers in place, watching out for the point of the hook so you don't get blood all over your creation, and just brush those fibers out. Looks a little messy. We'll fix that by making 2 cuts to reduce this to uniform length. There's one, and another, and with a haircut you have a version of the Kwan fly, which when upside down, which is how it's going to ride with those eyes, it looks like a mantis shrimp with lots of legs up here swimming. Instead of rubber legs, you have yarn legs, and these will move as this creature swims through the water.